How we doing? Yeah. I'm a Philly fly girl. Yeah. I'm a mamacita. I'm a yo shorty. It's the fall of 2001. I'm a senior in high school. I'm 17. When I wait for the bus, car stop in sweatpants. I go to a performing arts magnet school. I'm a dance major. Me and my girls, like, we're it. We dance in the parades, we're smart. We can, like, hold down an 8 count. Someone had the bright idea for us to do a cross-cultural connection with an all-boys school on the main line. Sure, why not? I could use a good prom date to scandalize the class. Let's do it. So we ride the bus in our Philly finest up the main line. We get there, and our school was brand new, so we thought we had a really good school. Our school could fit into their cafeterias. It's this big school, rolling lawns. It's nice. So we're gonna do an icebreaker. We have a facilitator, we're out there on the lawn. They're like, line up. Cool. Me and my girls are like, oh, these boys about to get dusted. They don't even know. You know, like we're about to race. And so the facilitator says, take a step forward if you feel safe walking by yourself at night. Take a step forward if you have a savings account. Take a step forward if you're a citizen. And so on and so forth. Questions like this just keep progressing. And you either take a step forward or you don't. So we reached the end of the game. Me and my girls were like, okay, all right. And then we look far ahead down that rolling lawn to the end, where the winners are, who are high-fiving and chest bumping. And it's one thing to learn about your history and to learn about who you are and your place and how you get to be where you are. It's one thing to learn that. And then it's another thing to play the game of power and privilege in America and you see where you are. Nobody's volunteering to be poor, black, and female. So needless to say, the ride home was very different than the ride up. And I struggled for a long time of where to put this new information. And I found numbers, numerology. And I wanted a black way of understanding numbers, because I'm black. And I did, and I found one. I found the concept of zero. It's a very African concept, and it says just what you might imagine. You know, zero from the surface appears to be nothing, a placeholder, something to start. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. But a 0 in front of a 1 is very different than a 0 behind a 1. It's very different than 2 zeros, very different than 3 zeros, on and so forth. Infinity times 0 is 0. A trillion divided by 0 is 0. I discovered peace. I discovered that my value is immutable, unchanging, everlasting, and that there's nothing anybody can do about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Intisar. Our next storyteller coming to us from the Disability and Accessibility Group, it's Barbara.
Test, test. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. When I entered elementary school, schools at the time did not have that much experience with physically disabled children. And to make matters more interesting for that school, I'm an identical twin, and my twin does not have my disability, or a disability for that matter. And when every child enters first grade in our school district, they're usually given a test to see where they land in reading, writing, numbers, and so forth. And my twin was given that test. And she excelled. And because they had to split us up, and we weren't allowed to be in the same classroom, she was placed in a classroom that needed less help, or had less help provided. And because I needed extra help, it was just assumed that I was going to need extra help. So I wasn't given that test. And I was placed in the classroom with extra help. Now, the kind of extra help that I needed was I didn't walk very well at the time, and I couldn't hold pencil very well. So I was the only physically disabled child in the whole school for all the years I was there, from grade 1 to grade 6. By the time I reached 7th grade, my twin was in above average classes, and I was in average classes. I was bullied a lot and ostracized daily, and I blame that for my being average classes, when I knew I was smarter than that. And all I wanted to do was be in class with my sister, because my sister and her friends were always much kinder to me than the classmates that I had. They always included me in play and accepted me the way I was. At the end of 7th grade, we were given a chance to take an algebra test, or a test to see if we were in algebra the next year, a year early. So instead of 9th grade, take it in 8th grade. I thought, oh, this is my chance to be in a class with my sister, or begin the process of being in all above average classes, because I knew I was smart. I learned more about this test. This test is a timed test. It has multiple choice questions, and it's, of course, obviously about math. Now, I don't take time tests very well. Never did, never will, still don't. Because you know those little circles that you have to fill in with your pencil? They're my nemesis, especially with that hand. So I knew when I sat down to take this test, pencil in hand, I wasn't going to finish. So I was angry, but I was going to do my best and see what happens. Well, the bell rings, and I only finished 50. What's 50 out of 100? An F. There goes my chance. A couple days later, we get the results back. I look at my results. Holy cow! I got all 50 correct! Imagine if I had the time to finish all 100. That would mean I would be in algebra. I deserve to be in algebra. I got all 50 correct. So I took myself down to the guidance counselor's office the next day to have a discussion about it with her. She didn't say no, but she said she would need to talk to the current teachers I had and the future teachers I was going to have if this all was going to pan out the way I was hoping. And they also needed to talk to my parents, because I didn't tell my parents what I was doing. All the teachers but one thought I would do okay in all above average classes, except for the algebra teacher. But my mom's an 8th grade math teacher in a different school district. Kind of lucky there, aren't I? So all that summer, my mom worked with me to get me up to speed on the math I missed, because I was essentially skipping a grade. And by the time 8th grade came, 8th grade went, I did okay in all my classes. And I was in all above average classes at the time. So summer comes for 9th grade, and you get your schedule for 9th grade, and you're looking at it, you're comparing it with your sister and saying, oh, look, we got biology together, cool. I look closer at it, and I see that the math class I was slated to take is not there. Instead, some other math class. What happened? Well, it turns out that the special gym class I have been taking since 7th grade coincided in time with the math class I was going to take. And gym was more important, so it won. Not my family. My mom's a math teacher, my dad's a computer scientist. That's not gonna fly. So it was agreed upon that I would take gym in the library and write reports on sports. I would never play. But that's okay, because I was in class with my sister. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. All right, so our next storyteller comes from the Climate Action Group and the Gender Equity Team. Let's give it up for the overachiever.
I don't think anybody's ever called me that. I'll take it. You all know people who idealize the past. They see everything through rose-colored glasses. My God, when I was a kid, yada, yada. Well, when you suffer with depression, it's often the opposite. You see things that happen, maybe even beautiful things, and all you can do is treat yourself with self-criticism and sometimes even shame. I'll give you an example. In 1986, I was given the opportunity to go to China soon after the doors opened to the West. And I was placed in a small city of 2 million in north central China, claimed to fame, the world's second largest open-air coal mine. The air was filthy. And then the Gobi Desert was to the west of us, and the wind would blow the yellow dust into town. So our windowsills, the toilet seats, everything was covered with a fine layer of dust. But it was cool, it was interesting. I taught graduate students in English. And one of my students came from a small village and invited me to his wedding. So with another student, I got a diesel train for 2 hours through the dusty countryside, I don't know, Arizona or something. And then 2 hours in, we arrived at a large train station in a small town. And I'm met by a minibus. And we take a bus down sort of windy, steep roads until we get dropped off seemingly in the middle of nowhere when some bicycles come from around the corner. And we are to hop, side saddle, onto the bicycles, and in this way, our final journey into town. It's not a town, it's a village. It's a very small walled village. Every compound is surrounded by a wall. You enter through a moon gate. Beyond the gate is a wall, but it's a false wall. It has a mural, but it's there to block the evil spirits. And when you enter, you go around the gate, around the wall, and then you're in the courtyard. And beyond the courtyard is a door and a window that leads into a cave. And these people live in cave houses, or they build the homes into a wall, so it becomes like a cave. I took out my camera. How amazing to be in a place like this. But I'm instantly surrounded by the villagers who have never had their photographs taken. So that becomes my job. And we start with the oldest generation. Sitting, someone grabs a folding chair, like yours aren't folded, but anyway, and place them in front of the gate and start getting their photos taken. The older women's had bound feet. You won't find that anymore, that generation is gone. But the sun started getting low in the sky, the shadows were slanted, so pick up the chairs and grab a mini bike, and together we chased the shadows around the village until we found the edge of a canyon where finally there was enough sunlight. And in ones and twos, a baby in a tin carriage, people gathered and I got their photos all taken. That evening we went back, had a marvelous wedding, saw local Chinese opera, and I spent the night. The next morning I was invited to stay. And I'd love to tell you about how I stayed, and I learned the stories of the elder generation, what it was like to have bound feet. But I can't, because I didn't. I got on a train. There was like a cute guy back in Taiwan where I taught. I don't even remember his name now. And so, yeah, I look back and say, what an idiot, I blew it, what an opportunity. And I went on to grad school and I met these students who had gone to these villages or other areas of China and stayed immersed for 3 years, never spoke English, and I compared myself. And my husband says, well, he says he's quoting the Buddha, I don't know, but he always said, all comparison is suffering. And it is. So fast forward to a couple years ago, my son went to Costa Rica. It was only for a week, but he was shadowing some ambulances and was really excited. And he posted pictures of stucco walls, beautiful colors, cast iron gates, and on the weekend he went to the beach. And there were pictures of him holding beers with a drunken look on his face. And I thought, well, you blew it. You were so close to the ruins, and this is how you spend your weekend. I didn't say this, but I thought it. And then I thought, oh, he's 22. He's acting like a 22-year-old. Then I realized I was 22 when I was in China. And so I was able to look back at my life and my experiences with acceptance and compassion. And telling it now, I can see the experiences for the magical times that they actually were. Thank you.
Thank you, Meg. All right, our next storyteller is a friend of HCAM through the Arts Advocacy Group. Let's give a warm welcome to the stage, Teresa.
One of the best weeks of my life was the week I spent with my brother when he went into hospice care and died. We were born 363 days apart. Now, in the 1950s, that meant we shared a playpen, we shared everything. We were, Teresa and Joe, one word. But we could fight, and we also fought as adults. Once my husband asked me, why do you stay so connected to your brother? And I said, you don't understand. You only see his armor, I see his soul. So of course, when Joe went into hospice, I ran straight to him. Hospice provides drugs, a lot of drugs. I was thrilled. I knew Joe would not suffer. Joe, on the other hand, looked at the drugs and said, that's it. I'm just going to take them all, and that's the end of it. And I thought, well, it's, your life, your body, your choice. And I thought, he's going to be dead in a week anyway. He should just do what he wants. But Joe decided to stick around. And he had some important papers he needed to sign at the bank. So we thought the best thing to do was to load Joe up in the back of the car and drive over to the bank parking lot and let the bank bring the papers to him. So, good plan. That's what we're going to do. So, where Joe and I are sitting in the car, his wife goes in to get the bank manager. Joe's eyes get super big, and he says, Trees, it's happening now. I'm going out of my body right now. And I'm like, oh no. We need these papers signed. I get in his face and I say, you get back here right now. We freeze. Joe re-enters his body and we crack up. We are laughing so hard we cannot make ourselves stop. Out comes my sister-in-law with the bank manager. She shoots me a look that says, what are you two doing? Makes me laugh even more. The bank manager gives Joe the papers. I'm fumbling. We're just laughing about old times. We finish up. We go home. We're home 5 minutes, and the bank calls. Apparently, they think we're running some kind of swindle to get Joe's money, and now he has to answer security questions on the account. Great. The guy is completely drugged up. He's in a brain fog. He now has to take a test, and there's money riding on his answers. What could go wrong? No, Joe sits right up. He just spews off those answers. I'm impressed. The bank is completely satisfied. Joe slumps into his dying thing, and he says, I think I'm having a good death. I said, Joe, you are having a very good death. He starts to go downhill. He's pretty much stuck in the recliner at this point. But he says, I'd like to look out the window one last time. All right, it's 3 steps away. We help him up, 1 step, 2 step. I said, Jack, my sister-in-law, he's going down. I scoop him up under his armpits. My sister-in-law's got his knees and his ankles. I said, pivot, Jack. If he falls on the floor, we're so done. We'll never get him up. And as we're doing this, I've got Joe on his head on my shoulder, and in his drugged up, groggy voice, he says, I love you. And right there, in that moment, it's just me and Joe, our 2 little spirits in the playpen, communicating before we even had language. And I say, Joe, I love you too. We get him back in the chair. Joe gets to the point where he's not on the earth plane and he's not dead. And he's grimacing and it looks like he's trapped. It's kind of scary. So I raise my voice. I'm not quite sure what he hears, and I go, Joe, there are blueprints on the table. He could read prints. On the prints, you will see a door that corresponds to a door in the room. You'll know where the door is. Just walk through. You'll be fine. 5 seconds later, Joe's gone. We burst into applause. Get out of here. Go. We're so happy for Joe. Be at peace. My sister-in-law turns to me and she says, I'm not comfortable sending Joe's dirty body to the funeral home. I said, well, I'm not either. Now, if you had told me at some point in my life I'd be washing a corpse, I would have said, no way. But there was nothing I wasn't going to do for Joe this week. It felt like an honor. We got the soapy water. We got everywhere we could get. We get the gunk out of his eyes. We brushed his hair. And I am very pleased with the job that we did. And I remember thinking, now that is one good smelling dead body. We did a good job. All felt right with the world. We had concluded Joe's business. And I didn't realize until years later the gift that Joe had given me that week. I came to understand that when there is love, there is no fear, none. I miss you, brother. Thank you for letting me be a part of your very good death. Thank you.
Is a member of HCAN, also named Joe. Please welcome Joe to the stage.
Boy, I hope this is not a death at all. The difference between darkness that is scary and darkness that is deep is trust. I was in a cabin in Forksville, Pennsylvania. It's been sheeting rain for 3 days. And I was feeling an awful lot of the darkness, not very much of the trust. I was there with my son, who, 9 years old at the time, was the first of my 2 beautiful children, the person who made me a father. And before that point, I was an athlete, I was a musician, I was a guy with a job. The moment he was born, the only thing I wanted was to be a great dad. I And I felt like I was doing pretty good on that front, at least passively, until COVID visited us and brought some darkness into our home. So we all have a clotting disorder that makes complications much scarier for us. So we have had to really stay home and like stick together and wait it out. And in the time that that's happened, I watched my beautiful boy's heart get broken about 1,000 times. No baseball. Parents came for Christmas with masks, left the gifts outside in the yard, and we waved at each other through the door. When his best friend, the boy next door, best friend of his entire life, moved away, no hug. So Halloween weekend was coming up, and there was no chance that I was going to let him be stuck in that house and watch out his windows as all the kids from the neighborhood, all the friends that he couldn't see, streamed through the street, came to our house for candy and got a sugar high. That would be yet another thing that he was not allowed to have. So I booked us a cabin at the very aptly named World's End State Park. And I planned a long weekend. I took off 2 days of work that I could not take, and I planned for the centerpiece of the trip a side trip to a place called Cherry Springs State Park. It's a state astronomy park, and it's carved into the top of a mountain, and you're not allowed to have any lights nearby. It is the best place east of the Mississippi to see the stars. And I needed my son to know that the world was way bigger than it felt. And as that was what I planned, I spent money violently. I got a telescope, binoculars, star charts, a special blanket that was like waterproof on one side so we'd be able to lay down and look at the stars. I got a half a dozen, they're cheaper than a half dozen, I guess. Those little red lights. There's no white light on the top of this thing. I bought everything that I would possibly need for it to be a perfect night under the stars. It was going to be perfect because it was going to make it perfect. And as the day drew nearer, we got more darkness in the forecast. And it started to rain, and it did not stop. And so that's where we found ourselves in the cabin after 3 sheeting days of rain, and it continued to pour. And this was the night that we were going to go to Cherry Springs. This is what we had planned. And I started to try and protect him. Like I felt like I had before. For all the other little heartbreaks, I felt like a better dad would have protected him. And so I started to say, like, hey, Bubba, why don't we skip it this time? We'll come back. And you know what? The weather will be way better, and it'll be perfect. And he goes, Daddy's going to be fine. And I said, Finn, let's stay here. We'll have a wonderful time here. And he said, no, Daddy, let's go. And it's raining outside. I didn't want to be hurt. So we got in a car, and we started to drive. And we're talking, and I'm thinking of everything I could possibly tell him and keep him occupied. And after about an hour, I noticed that the rain had stopped. And I thought, well, I mean, we're not going to see the stars, and that's fine, but at least we got a break from the rain. Man, I'm grateful for that. And we kept driving, and the sun started to go down, and we got one of those sunsets that's like pink and purple, and it covers the whole sky. And every time you see one of those, at least for me, it's a reminder that, like, man, you should really look up more often. And we kept going, and we made our way to the top of the mountain. It got dark, and it is an astronomy park, so there's no light anywhere. I'm not exactly the world's greatest navigator, and so we walked all over all these different fields, soaked our feet in 1,000 hidden puddles, went to the wrong field, and finally ended up in the correct field, the place where I had planned for us to end up. And I looked up, and there was not one cloud in the sky. And we started to spread the blanket out, and he said, Daddy, see, I told you. And we laid down, and we looked up, and there were more stars in the sky than I had ever seen. It was like the finest glitter you can imagine, just spread thinly as far as the eye could see. and we laid there with my son beside me and the entire world behind us, I learned that only in such darkness can there be such light. Thank you.
We have one last story for you. Let's hear it for a member of our Racial Justice Action Group and our last storyteller, Raja.
So in 1984, I was living in South Georgia, and I was in first grade. And I loved first grade. A number of reasons, but one was I really loved my first grade teacher, Miss Odom. So if you can imagine someone who has the softest down on her arms and nice big pillowy arms, it's like wrapping my arms around her every day in class was like hugging a pillow. But I also loved Miss Odom because she let me spend a lot of time in class after I finished my work doing one of my favorite activities, which was to make paper dolls. And in the 1980s, paper dolls were awesome. If you don't remember this, they were like the bomb. So my mom wouldn't always buy all paper dolls that I wanted to, so I learned a technique of making my own paper dolls out of notebook paper. So you can imagine, after I turned my worksheets, I would lay out my notebook and I would have all these fashion illustrations I would be cutting meticulously out, putting my little slits in, sliding my doll in. My dolls had full wardrobes that heavily featured the color Midnight Blue, which is my favorite crayon brown. So first grade for me was everything. And 30 years later, I was a mom, and my oldest child went to first grade. And he loved first grade. He also loved his teacher, and he also loved The Hobbit. So back in the day, there were kids that liked, Lord of the Rings, and there were kids that liked The Hobbit and Harry Potter, and this was a first grader who was really into The Hobbit. So those of you that don't know the characters, Thorin Oakenshield is like the leader, And so this was, he was 6 years old, he would wear these things like robes wrapped around him, and every stick and rock became like a weapon. And in his first grade class, they had these stacks of sketchbooks they got to fill up when they finished their work. And so I met at a parent-teacher conference, I noticed there's a stack of these, and they're quite large, not quite 8.5 by 11, but big, heavy sketchbooks. Every inch of every page, front, back, cover, was covered with scenes from Hobbit. Every character, every outfit, the words, the battle scenes in meticulous detail, and it was in the tiniest of little scribbles to the largest of things, colored in every color of crayon. I just kept thinking, oh my gosh, he got to have this amazing first grade experience, and I also love first grade. 2 years later, we moved to the suburbs of Philadelphia, because I got a job up here, so we moved to Ardmore. And my youngest son was heading into first grade. And my youngest son also has a zest for life and loves a lot of things. And I think he still ended up loving first grade, but not maybe for the same reasons that me and my older son did. This was a kid who loved pretty much everything, but he especially loved to draw. When I say he loved to draw, from the minute he could hold on to a pencil or a crayon or marker, he drew on everything. Nothing is safe. Like, bunk beds were covered with seams. When he learned to draw, he had the letter N for his first initial of his first name. There were N's on the hardwood floors. I remember one morning I woke up and he was like passed out, exhausted, covered with silver Sharpie. He had found every toy in his toy box and had coated every inch of it with silver Sharpie. It's not the Midas touch, it's the silver Sharpie touch, right? And the pen was empty. That's the only reason he stopped is because he ran out of it. So he's in first grade, and I'm helping him with his homework. And by the way, first grade in Ardmore is a lot of homework. And I'm looking at his lettering, and first grade worksheets are pretty standard. It's like, finish writing these letters. So in one worksheet in particular, I remember it had words that ended with the letters E and N. So hen, pen, ten, right? So it would start with the first letter, and you would trace that, and then you had to, on your own, write the E and write the N. Well, the end of every single letter was this beautiful, perfect spiral curlicue. So it's like H-E, and then at the end of the E would be a little spiral. And if you can imagine sort of the vowel symbols on like Thai, written Thai script, right? Everything had this like flair to it. But on the worksheet when he brought it home, with the teacher's comments, there was a note. Nuri, please make sure that you are writing in the accepted first grade way. And so the teacher had gone and corrected his writing, and the column next to him, rewriting the same words, but in red. And the only difference, if you looked at the precision in his lettering, was her letters didn't have the beautiful curlicues at the end. Now, as someone who grew up in the 80s, I spent a long time perfecting the little hearts over my eyes, so I can really appreciate the time and energy Nuri had put into making these worksheets look beautiful. But something else about Nuri's worksheets were, he always added a little bit of extra. Well, one day I got a call home from school. I was like, we really need to talk to you about Nuri. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, did he hit somebody? Did he spit on somebody? You know, he's a zesty kid. You know? What do you do? What do you do? Well, we talk about his worksheets. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, you know, we stopped putting the curlicues on the letters. What's going on with the worksheets? Well, Nuri had been drawing on his worksheets. And I don't know if I maybe described this, but I started this career as a designer when I was first grade. And I had actually grown up and become a designer. Not only am I a designer, I teach design at Drexel. I actually lead a design program. So I said to her, what's wrong with drawing? And she was like, I really need him to concentrate on finishing his worksheets and turning them in. So she's going on about something about, paying attention in class, and of course we're on the phone, so she can't see my face, but I'm just like, rage is like, coming from my toes and steaming out of my ears. So just so we're clear, I teach design because I love to draw. I think in pictures, I think about ideas, and I have to figure out a way to describe them in ways that no one else can. In fact, people hire designers because they have these thoughts in their heads and they cannot visualize them. And so I had grown up being able to not only make my costumes and my little drawings, but I had been taught a way to describe ideas that no one else could through pictures. And not only that, I teach college kids to unlearn ways of describing things with words so they can learn to draw. So I say, I teach drawing for a living. There's no way I'm going to have my kid not draw in class. So I told her the same story that I told you. I told her about my experience in class in first grade. I told her about my oldest son's experience in class in first grade. I told her I would not be telling my son to stop drawing, but to figure out a way to integrate it in this way that he actually was learning in class. And so, we went on from there. And I'm happy to say that it didn't really matter because Nuri was never going to not draw. This was the kid who was drawing from the time that he could hold a Sharpie marker. But at the same time, it's so hard for me to imagine that we're still in 2016 here, having to worry about whether or not kids are drawing in the accepted first grade way. And so as an educator, I think it's so important for us to realize there is no accepted first grade way. There's always going to be a time to draw. Thank you.
Thank you, Raja. I want to give a shout out to one of our members who went through the Moth workshop series, Brenda, who prepared a beautiful story, who is not able to be here today. So Brenda is a member of our immigration and refugee group, and she crafted just a beautiful story about the change in her documentation status when she was young, and that led her on this evolving, changing relationship with her family's village in Mexico and the house that she visited and now gives her children to. So I think it's, we miss her today. We miss her today. So, I also, let me see here. Well, I also want to give a shout out to Sharon and Mimi, our wonderful interpreters. They're here today from DHCC, the Deaf Hearing Communication Center. And I'm going to turn the mic over to Sharon, our co-leader with the Disability and Accessibility Action Group, for a very special announcement. Here's Sharon.
Can you hear me? I am going to read because this is not my comfortable space. But I'm here to tell you about the fact that last year, HCAN endured a great loss with the passing of a longtime member and active contributor, Nelson Vecchio. Nelson was one of the original members of the planning committee and was passionate about bringing this event to life. He would certainly have been one of our storytellers today, and we've missed him greatly over the last year and feel his absence especially today. Those of us who have been fortunate enough to work with Nelson were deeply impacted by his commitment to activism and advocacy. With this award, we would like to honor Nelson's legacy and remember him and the difference that he made in the world, in particular his profound belief in advocating without alienating. Nelson Vecchione fought for the rights of diverse groups of people by appealing to diverse groups of people. He didn't write anyone off as unreachable merely because they embraced a different point of view. The Nelson Vecchione Award for Meritorious Service to Broadening Perspectives is established in memory of Nelson Vecchione and is intended to honor an individual who, like Nelson, builds bridges rather than walls. It will be awarded to a member of the community who brings together people of diverse beliefs and ideas to further the common good. Please stay tuned later this summer for a call for submissions.
Sharon. So, one last thank you to the Mainline Arts Center. To our interpreters, the storytellers. I want to encourage you, on your way out, be sure to drop by the tables to get more information about Mainline Arts Center. They have calendars, programs, brochures, all kinds of information about upcoming shows. And also a little reminder that the QR code that's on your program will take you to the HCAN website to learn more. And safe travels, and